Barack Hussein Obama and Hillary Rodham Clinton are in total panic. They've been forced to admit that Donald J. Trump is right about systemic election fraud.
Can you promise the American people that this election will be conducted in a fair way?
First of all, it's rigged. And I'm afraid the election's going to be rigged, I have to be honest.
Of course the elections will not be rigged. What does that mean?
Russian hackers were behind 2 recent attempts to breach state voter registration systems.
Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
The FBI has issued an advisory that urges the states to look for specific signs that could indicate attempts at similar cyber attacks.
But I want to tell you again, I don't know anything about it. And on the state level, Russia has never done this.
Multiple senior government officials tell NBC News they are now confident Russian intelligence was behind the DNC hack, although they lack definitive proof.
Our whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old who works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered.
Is that what it is? If we see signs that a voting machine or system is vulnerable to hacking, then we inform those local authorities who are running the elections that they need to be careful.
Some short-term, long-term things I think that we should do to bolster the cybersecurity around the election process. I am considering communicating with election officials across the country about best practices.
But of most concern, of course, are the separate computer systems that count and report actual votes. So far, no sign that any of those have been compromised.
This black box is unaccountable, untestable, privately run software from the 2 companies that you have hired to count our votes. So when the votes come out of this black box, they do not reflect the New York City or the national votes. In 22 primaries, the votes have shifted in 20 of them. The exit polling data in New York State shifted 12%. A shift of 2% is fraud, according to the U.S. State Department. So that's what we've seen across the country.
The Russians, and do I think they're trying to help Trump? That's the. Are they, right?
Russia has denied any involvement in the attacks on the U.S., and President Putin called the accusations an attempt to distract the public's attention.
Doesn't even matter who hacked this data from the campaign headquarters of Mrs. Clinton. The important thing is the content that was given to the public.
A little over a month ago, on July 30th, I pointed out the elephant in the room. Sanders. Mr. Trump, I'm not going to lay things out here that you don't already know. But I am going to ask you to seriously think about making the issue of Hillary's election fraud in the primaries one of the central issues to defeating her in November. We had just witnessed Hillary Clinton steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders. Now Stanford University's done their own study, has concurred with our analysis. We'd seen the Republican Party try to steal the nomination from Donald Trump by claiming that popular vote never counted.
The media has created the perception that the voters will decide the nomination, and that's the concept. That's the conflict here.
We feel like we live in a democratic society. What you're telling me is it's not a democratic society, and your votes don't necessarily matter because it's a democratic representation, correct?
No, that's not what I'm trying to tell you. What I'm trying to say is that we're just one of the political parties. There's many political parties, but political parties choose their nominee, not the general public.
George Will even wrote an editorial for the Washington Post saying, your mere plurality of votes doesn't override the party's sovereignty. Infowars issued an emergency message to Donald Trump, and within 48 hours, he responded.
First of all, it's rigged. And I'm afraid the election's going to be rigged, I have to be honest.
Why would you think that the election would be rigged?
Well, I'm looking at all of these decisions coming on down from the standpoint of identification, voter ID. And I'm saying, what do you mean? You don't have to have voter ID to now go in and vote? And it's a little bit scary. And I've heard a lot of bad things. I must say, 4 years ago, I was hearing a lot of bad things having to do with the Romney campaign where, when the vote came out, there were some districts that were really shockingly different from what they were anticipated to be. And I've been seeing it.
Within days of Donald Trump warning the people of the United States of the ongoing plot to steal the general election, Barack Obama went public and said that it was preposterous, ridiculous. In fact, he didn't even know what election fraud was.
It is, I don't even really know where to start on answering this question. Of course the elections will not be rigged. What does that mean? The federal government doesn't run the election process. States and cities and communities all across the country, they're the ones who set up the voting systems and the voting booths. And if Mr. Trump is suggesting that there is a conspiracy theory that is being propagated across the country, including in places like Texas, where typically it's not Democrats who are in charge of voting booths, that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense, and I don't think anybody would take that seriously.
Now the Washington Post, the New York Times, USA Today, Politico, you name it, are coming out and saying, we are so threatened by supposed Russian hackers in the database, and the Russian government runs Trump, and they run Alex Jones, and they run Paul Joseph Watson, why Putin runs everything, and they're dangerous, and we need to send Homeland Security in to take control of the elections to make sure they're not stolen from Hillary Rodham Clinton.
What I can say more broadly for the administration is that there has been a discussion about whether or not to designate certain voting systems that are, of course, maintained at the state and local level as pieces of critical infrastructure. And that would give the federal government and experts of the federal government.
But within weeks of Trump's announcement that he would be sending out observers to make sure our elections weren't fraudulent, Obama did a 180. He hired the UN, and he hired the security agency of the European Union, the OSCE, to come into the United States with Justice Department power and take over the elections to make sure that they were protected and had integrity.
The federal government doesn't run the election process. States and cities and communities all across the country, they're the ones who set up the voting systems and the voting booths. And if Mr. Trump is suggesting that there is a conspiracy theory that is being propagated across the country, including in places like Texas, where typically it's not Democrats who are in charge of voting booths, that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense, and I don't think anybody would take that seriously.
The truth is the Democratic Party in Illinois and California and many other states were openly pushing to let illegal aliens actually vote in the 2016 election. And Donald Trump and others are aware of that fact. And so they were calling to have local governments be involved in the integrity of the election process. So what did the feds do? They announced all these foreign observers were to come over, but they were going to then restrict domestic independent groups from poll watching. So what they're saying is, we'll let foreigners come in and watch from the socialist EU, but we won't let Americans oversee the elections internally. Look at this headline. Election security, federal help or power grab. Some state election officials say officers to aid the fight against hackers could lead to Washington taking greater control. And that's what Roger Stone said months ago on my radio show. He said, look, it'll be the feds coming in to oversee the elections that steal it. USA Today had the headline, Homeland Security can't step in to protect the election. The Examiner reported, Homeland eyes special declaration to take charge of elections. Here's the facts. The Russians have a GDP the same size as Italy. They're not influencing the United States in any way that's even measurable. The globalists have conquered this country. They've taken it over by stealth. They've captured our nation by fraud. And they are so scared that nationalists, just like the nationalists we saw in the UK that voted for the Brexit, are now actually communicating with the people through the new independent media. That's why they're calling for internet censorship. That's why they're calling for internet IDs. That's why they're calling for actually shutting down Matt Drudge and sites like drudgereport.com and Infowars.com, because they can't compete with the facts. They can't compete with the information. And they know we're not going to stand by and watch them steal the election like they tried to do with the primaries. And so they're claiming we're Russian agents. The truth is, we're agents of an open and truly free society and a republic where it's one person, one vote, no matter what race, color, or creed you are, as long as you bleed red blood and are American. And the truth is, Donald Trump and countless others are mobilizing private, independent poll watchers that are going to expose the fraud. And it's got the power structure really shaken up. They thought they'd just come in and steal this general election like they stole the primary for Bernie Sanders. They thought they'd do it in the dark when none of us were watching. The truth is, we're watching. So now they're doubling down, bringing in the EU, the UN, and all these Democrat-run feds to save the integrity of it, when they were just telling us a month ago that there was total integrity and nothing to worry about. They're panicking because they know humanity is on the march and their oppressive empire of tyranny is on the run. 2016 is a crossroads. It's one of the most important times in humanity's history. And you better believe the entire crew and the listeners and viewers of Infowars are going to be there on the right side of history, defending open, free societies and our right to vote in this constitutional republic that is known as the United States of America. Buckley, tell us about Alexa Pure Breeze, discounted over 25% off as an introductory promotion.
It's the Alexa Pure Breeze. It's an energy-efficient HEPA ion cluster air purification system. It has a 4-stage purification process. It has a HEPA filter, pre-filters, and a carbon-activated filters. And the most amazing thing about it is that it has this patented ion cluster technology that kills airborne microbes with a final byproduct of clean water, not ozone. Because there's a lot of units out there that do that will sterilize the air. They will take out toxins and microbes, but you always come back into the room and you have that ozone smell. And as a matter of fact, if you leave a room sealed and you have one of those running,
toxic.
It is toxic and it's kind of dangerous. So this is non-toxic. It's a beautiful unit. It really looks good. I mean, it will look beautiful in your house in a corner.
The Alexa Pure Breeze, which operates as a fan, it's super quiet, it cleans the air. Every major room in your house really should have one of these.
The cheapest equivalent unit costs $259.95, and there are other units that are up to $899 to $1,000 that do exactly what this unit does, but they're not as quiet because this one has a silent mode which runs at 16 decibels. One thing that I encourage everybody to do is go and just look up online the toxicity of being inside all the time. In this current age, we're inside the vast majority of the time. Hardly do we ever get outside in the sun. We're usually out inside doing something in our office or at home. Houses have all kinds of stuff that's outgassing. I'm not going to tell you what the story is, but just go and Google that and look at a toxicity.
Sure, it's well known. Great job, Alexa Pure. Infowarsstore.com, Infowarslife.com for all the nutraceuticals. Buckley, thank you so much, my friend.